welcome to Insights. I'm Dick Goldberg, and our subject today, reviving intimacy and sexuality in a long-term relationship. How do you get the romance and excitement back after all years have passed in a marriage or a relationship? Our guest is Jane James. She's been a sex therapist and marriage counselor for 35 years, and she's still doing it. She's a diplomate of the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. Thanks for being with us, Jane.
Thank you for having me.
Is this even possible to get a relationship back to that high pitch of intimacy and sexual excitement it had in the beginning, or is this a silly subject?
It's very much not a silly subject, but you framed it very well in the problem that people have. A lot of couples do come into our offices for this issue.
Well, they do.
A lot. And the problem is exactly as you stated. They want back what they had. And no surprise to many of us, they are not going to get back what they had in the same way that they're not going to get back their body shape, their energy, their innocence, so many other things in their lives. Can they have a wonderful closeness and experience with each other? Yes, but they have to be in the present, a theme that we're hearing on so many levels right now, rather than trying to recreate something that is gone.
Well, okay, let's talk about a couple that got together and let's say get married when they were 23 and they're now 40.
You bet. Yeah.
Okay, and they jogged, they go do yoga, they're in great shape physically, they're still pretty attractive. Why can't they get back to where they were when they were 23?
Well, one of the things is that it's not our external appearance which causes us to experience the intimacy. That is part of this culture. What really is necessary is to have an emotional intimacy, and in this world today, again, as you so well put it, we jog, we work out, we work hard, we buy things, we fill our lives with everything else except for time for each other to truly talk. So that one of the major issues that people have, especially when they're in long-term relationships, because why should they have to talk to each other at that point? They know each other so well,
right.
Is that they're inattentive to really asking how the other one is emotionally doing and being curious.
And you think they were asking this
mind.
When they were dating and in their first part, they were asking these things?
They're fascinated by each other. Their lives are filled with wondering what the other one is doing. You get about an 18-month, if you're lucky, 3-year window, which they call limerence,
yes,
where you can hardly tolerate being away from the other person, and your life is full of wondering about this other individual. And every hormone in your body, both male, female, whatever combo the couple is geared towards connecting. And then real life sets in, and we really have not been taught the difference between the sex act or the job of sex and being lovers. And if you want a long-term connection, then what you need to do is to really focus on being lovers.
What is the difference?
Being a lover is somebody who cares about the other person. A lover is someone who attends to knowing that other individual on numerous levels, who has humor, who laughs, who can communicate how much caring there is between the two, and it's not related to, are you the right weight, do you have any wrinkles or not, what other attractive younger people are wandering around, and how successful you've been at your business.
Well, I have this hunch that if men are listening and women are listening, we're losing the men and gaining the women as you talk.
Well, the only thing that I can say to that, Dick, and this is an extremely important message to get out, is that very well may be the truth, but of course that's what happens in our offices too. The men will bring the women in, and this is not a 100%, really important to emphasize. However, a percentage does say that it is the men who are still wanting the physical act, and we're talking heterosexually right now,
Yeah.
of intercourse. And women, as we age, find that desire drops, but interest can be there, but we have to be intrigued by our partner. Men are still very focused on the act.
Sexuality,
Yeah.
the physical act.
Yeah.
Well,
and you don't get that. You don't get there with women that
Okay,
way.
you're way ahead of me in the question I wanted to ask, which is
Okay.
define the difference between intimacy and sexuality.
Well, I think the difference very easily, very simplistically, there's the old book of The Joy of Sex, where the problem can be with sexuality. This is especially for women. It becomes the job of sex. It's an act. It's something that they are expected to do 2 to 3 times a week. And if they do not provide services, they receive a lack of emotional response on the part of their partners.
Is this an old cliche? Are you saying this still exists?
This very much still exists.
Come on.
I very much still
That
exists.
sounds so 20th century.
As only you can put that.
Wow.
Very much so. That there's a huge discrepancy between how men can perceive intimacy, closeness, and women do.
Okay, are you saying that men perceive intimacy as sexual acts and women
Right.
perceive it as emotional connection?
Right.
I got it?
Right. That's right. And couples who do well, who will report that they have good interest, good desire, do not define it necessarily as intercourse. Now, there's one that, yes, Dick's eyebrows have just been raised, everybody, that people can report that they have very satisfying intimacy, and that can mean for them in long-term relationships that they hug, they cuddle, they hold hands, they get into bed together, and they have hungry skin, they enjoy each other. But the reality is, over a period of time in a relationship, you have things like illnesses, you have events that hit at a person's ability to respond with this idea of physical desire. So what happens is that people lose track of each other. And we're all aware of that. You know, it's still one of these things that people will wait. And I can tell you this week I've seen, this is midweek, I've seen 3 couples in my office with this issue. They wait until after dinner, late at night, when they have gone on their computers and finished all the tasks that they haven't done for the day. Some of them are battling with playing games on computers, and then they get into bed and they're tired, but one wants to have a sexual encounter, and the other one really would prefer to go to sleep.
Is this almost always the guy wants the sex and the woman wants to go to
It's
sleep?
not. It's mostly. It's
Yeah.
not always, but it's mostly.
well,
Men work at this point. Workaholics exist
For
of
both
both
sexes.
sexes. So it is true also that there are more women, because we've gotten more support for being who we are, who really would like to have physical closeness, and the men it can be as extreme as they're falling asleep in their clothes. You know, they're just tired.
You're describing men as pretty psychologically dumb, I think. What you're saying is that men see closeness as sexuality. They don't get that over time it's really not about that.
I wouldn't call it dumb. What I would say is that for men, and I think this is still the case, that emotional vulnerability is very risky. And therefore, if they're able to be sexual, and I'm talking about intercourse sexual, then that relaxes them enough to be emotionally vulnerable. Now, the exact opposite occurs for women.
Yeah.
that women need the emotional intimacy in order for them to relax and be vulnerable enough to allow the pleasure of contact to occur. Now, women can have interest, but that doesn't mean that desire is
okay,
going
so
to be there.
after the guy shares his feelings and all this with her and without sex,
Yeah.
and he wants to tell her his insecurities and how much he loves her and ask her all about her, and they connect. I'm not saying this is some tool or a ploy on a guy's part, but if that happens,
Yeah.
then you're saying the woman feels a little more sexual, a little more open to sexuality.
Yes, but it's more complicated even than that. That over a period of time, in long-term relationships, a woman's love, caring, respect for a partner it doesn't have to encompass intercourse.
Sure.
Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't.
And for the man?
Actually, the same can be true, but of course, men are not allowed the idea that there is that range. People can produce orgasms by many different means. Major for couples is that they don't talk. They may talk about a range of other things, but they don't talk about how they have changed and their desires and their interests and their concepts of closeness have perhaps evolved. And if they can't talk about it, they can't come together and form a mutual appreciation and enjoyment.
Okay, I need, for me, this to be a little more linear and
course.
specific.
Okay.
So you're saying, I think I'm hearing you say, couples have to talk about their needs, maybe their sexuality. It might be the woman says, hey, do we have to have intercourse? Isn't there other ways we can have sex? And
It
hopefully the guy
hurts.
says, yeah.
I'm going through menopause.
Yeah.
My hormones are different. Yes, I'm using lubrication, but it's still painful.
Yeah.
It's not that big a deal for me to be having intercourse anymore. And as a matter of fact, there's some negatives about that. Let's broaden this out.
How many
please.
couples do you think at age, say, 50, sit down and say, let's talk about our sex life and what's good for us and what isn't, and maybe what we should change?
Single digits.
Wow. So they're kind of...
There's an expectation that they know. And there's an expectation of what the norm is. And it gets in the way of people really enjoying each other and expanding out their sensuality, sexuality to cover a lifetime.
Wow. So if you look at the normal progression of a traditional marriage, say getting married at 26, which I think is about the average age of...
Right now, yeah.
Yeah. How many times do people have intercourse that first year and the 10th year and the 20th year? What is the progression of decline? I assume there is a decline.
Well, you know, the old one that we've used for years and years and years, you take a jar and you put a bean or something in it for every time you have heterosexually intercourse in the first couple of years of your marriage, and you can pretty much take the bean out for the rest of the marriage.
It really declines.
Yeah, and there's also a difference between mutual enjoyment and numbers.
Yes.
And what you're really wanting to do is to have two people who are together and who are enjoying what they have and what they're doing. You can tell that in couples around you, the ones who are truly enjoying each other. And the definitions can be, again, as I said, anywhere from heterosexually intercourse, which is truly enjoyable for both,
Yeah.
to holding hands, to rolling around in bed, to body caress, to just a lot of warmth and closeness and intimacy. And we get caught with the job, the act, and that pushes people away from each other, where each person feels inadequate, and there's no discussion about
Why?
But what?
Why no discussion? Why don't they talk about it?
Because who's ever said it's been okay to truly talk about this?
Well, wouldn't women talk to their girlfriends about it?
Not so. That actually is also a myth. It's very interesting. Women do not talk about the actualities of what kind of sexual intimacy is going on in long-term marriages,
So they're
relationships.
alone with this. They're alone with this.
Right. You can talk about a lot of other things,
Yeah.
but you don't necessarily get together and talk about what's going on behind your bedroom door.
I think I have a hunch why couples don't talk about it, because they think if they talk about it, it's going to ruin it. It loses its mystery if you say, well, I'd like you to do this with your hand and blah, 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 and intercourse hurts and I'd like this. That they're afraid it loses its mystery then.
Well, there are a lot of people out there where the mystery, my dear, is long gone.
Maybe there's
Good try.
magical thinking that you'll have the mystery. If something will happen.
I don't think
But
that's
let's
where...
get back to numbers. I like numbers.
All right, well, you can
And,
try for numbers. Let's see. Remember that statistics are made up by people who lie, so we'll see how
all
well
right.
we do.
But at least let's pretend. So, in the beginning, people have intercourse in marriage. Is there like 3-4 times a week? Is there any data on that versus 20 years later where they're having it once a week or once a month or?
It can be far less than that. It
Less
can
than
be,
once a month?
Oh, you bet. You bet. There are people who have not had intercourse in years.
What age?
Anywhere from very hard to tell. I mean, it depends on what's going on for them, but there are people who have stopped having intercourse in their 40s. Their late 40s. And if they are having intercourse, which for me is more the issue, it doesn't mean it's an enjoying experience.
Yeah, right.
It may be it's an experience that's going on because one person feels like that's what's necessary and the other one feels the need to stay within the norm, that's an expectation to satisfy. There's also the fear that the person who is not getting what he or she wants will emotionally withdraw. So again, there's that rejection.
Wait a minute. Isn't that the fear the guy will withdraw because it's usually not the woman pushing?
It can be either. It can be either. But it is true that unhappily, stereotypically, it's more often the man.
We got to work on here, Jane.
What do we have to work on, Dick?
The definition of intimacy versus sexuality.
Yes.
You want to try?
Intimacy, I'll try. Intimacy is a sense of closeness. It's a bonding between two people. It's liking, enjoying, appreciating the other one, where you look and you feel the humor, you feel the softness, you feel the empathy with the other person. Sexuality can be purely an act.
Mm-hmm.
And actually can infringe upon intimacy. Because if one person feels
getting a bad deal,
coerced into a behavior, that person can withdraw and look for closeness elsewhere with friends, with other activities. Also, many people do, over a period of time in long relationships, form their own sets of friends. They go about their own lives. They connect because they have children. They have relatives. They have financial arrangements. They have a lot of different things.
Why is
besides,
that bad?
It's not bad at all, but it isn't the same thing as the two of them having a physical intimacy that they both appreciate and enjoy. We have got to expand out our definition of what physical enjoyment is, and to just put it down to a heterosexual behavior of intercourse is losing a lot of the population.
Let me get back to intimacy. Isn't it, I think of it as sharing feelings, sharing insecurities, sharing what's inside. You talk about have humor. Well, what if
Huge.
What?
Humor.
You think it's huge. What if neither of you are very funny, but you still can be close?
Good for you.
You're funny, Jane, but I wonder if you're projecting, because not everybody's as funny as you.
I think that people can find humor with each other. I think that when you're trying to play, because good intimacy is playful too. I mean, of course
Yeah.
it has its serious, deep moments,
Uh-huh.
but when your bodies change, when parts on each person sag, when you are looking at each other, perhaps through rose-colored glasses, but you're looking at each other and you just are able to say, you are the cat's meow still for me. You need to be using your humor so that you can laugh at different things. You have an ability to appreciate anything from the fact that a person isn't able to control. Here's one of the things I have a habit of doing: farts.
Oh, my.
And here we go. Now
That doesn't do much for your sex life.
but it's life, and here's somebody
Yes.
you've been with
Yes.
for a long, long period of time.
Yeah.
Why? What are you hiding? What's the need to create some other kind of image?
Yes.
Why? That's intimacy.
What I'm hearing is in intimacy, you are really free to be yourself. You feel really
Bingo,
relaxed.
bingo, bingo. And out of that comes the ability to explore sensual, sexual feelings in whatever way
Wow.
you choose.
But I remember a good friend of mine saying, sex is really exciting until you really get to know somebody. The better the friendship with a lover, the less the sexuality is exciting, but the intimacy is great. You buy
I think
that?
that's built on that earlier definition of what desire is. That's the limerence. That's people looking for, easier for men also, but looking for that fire to go off. Well, in a long-term relationship, what you have is you're looking at the other person and you're saying, I really love you. I really know you well. Because I know you so well, the idea of being close with you in so many different ways is appealing to me because you are my special person.
Ah, that's very nice.
And that is a lovely thing for people to have.
Okay, well, underneath this, what I'm hearing, Jane, is getting close is the brass ring, not sexuality.
That's right. Sexuality is something that people can define within the context of their own relationships, and they have to talk about it to decide what sexuality means to them.
Okay. So if, let's say you do have a close relationship, as you described, you've totally accepted the other person with their flaws.
Yeah.
You know them inside out. They know you, and there's a comfort in that.
Yeah.
What if you say, you know what, sex just isn't fun anymore. We don't need it.
Right.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
How could that be? That's not what you're supposed to say. You're supposed to say,
I know you didn't expect me to say that.
No.
Yes, it is. Because there are many couples for whom that is the case. One size does not fit all. And people need permission to acknowledge that.
Okay, let me challenge this. Now, let's say the wife says, I really don't enjoy sex anymore. I don't feel...
I like gardening.
Yeah,
Thanks. I enjoy a good
I love
book.
you. I want to hold your hand. I want to appreciate
You're
you.
the best.
And the husband says, I'm not done, honey.
Yeah.
I'm still sexual. Do you mind if I just use the computer and that'll be my sex life? Is that okay?
That's a different kind of thing. Using the computer especially leads us into some bogs, some sand pits. The computer right now is quite addictive and dangerous for many people. So I would not say that would be the case. I think that there are options for people such as masturbating. There's the idea, again, can people talk about this? If one says, you know what, I just don't have that energy anymore, and I love you, and I think you're wonderful, and I want to be married to you for the rest of my life, or I want to be with you for the rest of my life. And the other one says, well, I've got all of this energy going on. Well, one person could say to the other one, well, I'm present, I can be here, I don't mind helping you.
Okay.
It's just that I myself don't have that kind of energy.
So,
you're
okay.
handsome, you're beautiful, you're everything anybody could desire. It's absolutely great. It's just I'm not there.
And what I'm hearing through this is negotiate and
Yes.
talk about
Yes.
your needs, her needs.
It's all right. It's all right.
Talk about whatever you feel.
Isn't that what intimacy ought to be? If
Yeah.
you're married to somebody for those many years, shouldn't you be able to have some of these conversations? What is it that says that this is a topic that we're still,
It's interesting, yeah.
in the 21st century, we're not allowed to truly talk about?
Now, I
This is crazy.
haven't brought up the subject of gay relationships. And is that a subject, we don't have too much time left, is that a subject we can address, or is that a subject for another half hour? Because it's so different on this issue of long-term intimacy and sexuality.
Oh, there's so much to say about it. But long-term sexuality, same kind of baseline occurs. People have got to be able to talk about what they want, where they are with each other, and how they can work out compromises which allows them to wake up in the morning or walk through the day and think of that other person and have wonderful, dear thoughts about the other person. How they physiologically work out their exchanges is different. There's the idea that people, and it may be cause for another program, but that people, as they get older, are looking at what the options are, and it's not the case that people are either heterosexual or gay. You know, that you can have a great deal of closeness with people who are friends and have been available for a long period of time, and that closeness can cover a wide range.
I see. You know, what would be useful is to talk to the newlywed. I'm taking you're saying
You bet, absolutely.
And
You
on the gay subject, by the way, of gay couples, before we get to the newlyweds, I was thinking, I wonder if lesbian couples are quite different than men, homosexual men, in terms. I would picture lesbians having less trouble with keeping up intimacy, since women like to talk about their feelings all the time, much more than men do. They're more vulnerable and open to that. So wouldn't it be easier for a lesbian couple?
Long-term couples, which we now have and know exist in good numbers, are dealing with this issue, whether they're gay or lesbian, trying to figure out what. Again, we're back to this norm, only to discover that this is one of the great secrets. We don't know what the norm is because there's so many people who are not talking about what's really happening.
So it's not like a clear black and white
It really
line.
is not.
Lesbian women have this down, and
No.
heterosexual couples have the problem.
Exactly.
Back to the newlyweds.
All right.
Okay, so Jane James is giving advice to couples that are 26 and getting married about how not to fall into this rut. Okay. The mic is yours. Tell us.
Okay. I would say to people, start by developing a language. Start by prioritizing time for your intimacy, and that means being able to learn about each other and using curious mind. Do not assume that the act is the answer for everything, because that way there be dragons. Bad problems. Do not put your intimacy at the very end of the day or when you're tired.
By intimacy, you talking about conversation or sexuality?
You bet. Yes.
Both. Yeah, both, yes.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I would say start by prioritizing this part of your lives. Start by being present, being in the now with each other. Don't assume because it's great at this moment that it will be great forever after. Heterosexually, big issue. Men marry women for how they are at this moment and assume they will always be that way. women marry men because they assume they can tweak them enough and they will be lovely and
That's so
wonderful thing.
We're both dumb. Yeah.
Over the years, and nobody talks to the other.
Wow. And finally, I realized I forgot something very important.
Yes.
The introduction of children. Can you keep it with the introduction of 2 or 3 kids in your house?
Can you keep intimacy? You bet, because you start with the idea that you are telling the children, huge topic that I am very invested in, that parents, whatever the genders, need private time. And that the kids grow up with the idea that parents love each other, like each other enough to want some time for themselves also. So that what an astounding idea. Kids grow up with the idea that there is intimacy within a committed relationship.
That's a beautiful answer. I'm glad I got that in before we had to say goodbye, Jane. But it's really great to see you and talk to you about this, and it's very enlightening. Thanks very much.
You are welcome.